The title says 15 things Japanese people never do before bed, but the honest version is more interesting than a fake universal rulebook. There is no scientific list proving that every Japanese person avoids the same exact 15 bedtime mistakes. What there is, and what makes this topic worth watching, is a strong overlap between Japanese sleep guidance, Japanese family bedtime research, and a broader Japanese lifestyle preference for order, routine, bathing, and not letting the evening spiral out of control. So this is not a claim about every person in Japan. It is a fact-checked look at 15 bedtime behaviors that Japanese sleep advice and Japanese routines repeatedly discourage. The first one is using the bed like a glowing second living room. Japanese sleep guidance and Japan-based wellness materials repeatedly warn against screen exposure before bed. And Japanese family bedtime routine research specifically included avoiding electronic devices as a desirable routine element. That matters even more when you add a large 2025 student study from Norway, which found that each additional hour of screen use in bed was associated with a much higher risk of insomnia and less total sleep. Even if survey data cannot prove perfect causality, the point is simple. If the bed becomes a place for scrolling, streaming, and endless stimulation, the brain stops treating it as a clean signal for sleep. The second habit is taking caffeine too deep into the evening. A Japan-based sleep hygiene guide promoted the 10-3-2-1-0 rule. And the first number in that formula means stopping caffeine around 10 hours before bedtime. That sounds strict until you remember how long caffeine can linger in the body. A late coffee at 4 in the afternoon can still be part of the problem at midnight. Japanese sleep advice is often practical rather than mystical on this point. If the goal is better sleep, do not negotiate with a stimulant that is still active while you are trying to wind down. The third habit is treating alcohol like a bedtime tool. This one matters because a lot of adults mistake sedation for quality sleep. Japan-based guidance, like sleep advice elsewhere, warns that alcohol close to bedtime may make you drowsy faster but can disrupt sleep quality later in the night. You may fall asleep quicker and still wake up less restored. That distinction is crucial because a nightcap can feel effective while quietly wrecking the second half of the sleep cycle. The result is the worst kind of false comfort. You think you solved the problem because the lights went out, but the body is doing poorer repair work underneath. The fourth habit is eating a heavy meal right before bed. The same Japan-based sleep hygiene material recommends avoiding heavy meals within about 3 hours of bedtime. That advice survives because it keeps showing up in real life. If digestion is still working hard while the rest of the body is supposed to be shifting towards sleep, the night often feels heavier, warmer, and less settled. This is one place where Japanese routine culture and general sleep science line up very cleanly. The evening meal matters, but the timing matters too. The fifth habit is moving straight from work mode into sleep mode with no transition at all. The 10-3-2-1-0 framework recommends stopping work about 2 hours before bed. That sounds almost luxurious until you place it inside Japanese social reality, where overwork, long commutes, and accumulated sleep debt have been public concerns for years. In that context, the decompression zone is not a self-care cliché. It is a practical barrier between the stress chemistry of the day and the sleep the body is trying to produce at night. If the laptop closes at midnight and the pillow arrives at 12:03, the nervous system usually has not caught up. The sixth habit is turning the bed into a multipurpose office, dining table, or entertainment station. Sleep hygiene guidance in Japan and elsewhere warns against using the bed for everything except sleep and intimacy because the brain learns through association. If emails, snacks, streaming, and doom scrolling all happen in the same exact physical space where sleep is supposed to begin, that space stops carrying a clean message. Japanese routine culture tends to respect boundaries between functions, and the bedroom benefits from that mindset. The body rests better when the room feels like a destination, not a continuation of daytime clutter. The seventh habit is blasting bright indoor light late at night. A Japanese study on evening light exposure found that even moderate fluorescent indoor light could suppress nocturnal melatonin in adolescents. That makes the light issue more than mood or aesthetics. It is chemistry. A brightly lit home at midnight may look efficient, but the body can interpret it as a signal that the day is still active. This is one reason the softer visual style of many Japanese evening routines matters. Lower lights, gentler spaces, and more deliberate transitions do not just feel calm. They give the biology of sleep fewer reasons to resist. The eighth habit is letting television and internet use drift later without a cutoff. A Japanese university study found that watching television and using the internet at night were associated with delayed bedtimes among students living with family. That is country-specific evidence for a problem people usually discuss in generic terms. The issue is not that screens are evil in the abstract. The issue is that unbounded media stretches the evening. One clip becomes 3. One episode becomes 2. Midnight becomes 1 in the morning without any clear decision ever being made. A disciplined bedtime often depends less on heroic willpower than on visible stopping points. The 9th habit is letting late-night social communication hijack the whole night. The same Japanese student study found that late-night interpersonal communication was one of the major factors associated with delayed bedtime among students living away from home. That is an important distinction because the problem is not just blue light, it is stimulation. Messages, calls, relationship drama, and social bonding all activate the mind differently from passive silence. A person can put down the phone and still carry the conversation in their head for another hour. Japanese routine advice tends to value a quieter emotional landing before sleep. And this is one reason why. The 10th habit is ignoring the next morning while planning the night. In the Japanese student study, attending morning classes and eating breakfast were linked with earlier bedtimes for students living away from home. That detail is deceptively powerful. Bedtime becomes easier to control when wake time is real. If the next morning has structure, the night has boundaries. If tomorrow feels optional, tonight expands. Many Japanese routines, especially in work and school life, are built around the idea that the morning is not a suggestion. That attitude echoes backward into the evening and helps explain why regular bedtime can be easier to maintain when the next day has shape. The 11th habit is going to bed in a state of high emotional or physical arousal. Research on bedtime routines emphasizes the value of calming activities and the risks of pre-sleep hyperarousal. In Japanese family routine discussions, quiet transitions, simple rituals, and deliberately calming the child or self before bed appear again and again. That might mean bathing, laying out tomorrow's things, lowering lights, changing into sleepwear, or doing one slow housekeeping task that signals closure. The point is not performance. The point is nervous system downshifting. Sleep tends to arrive more smoothly when the final half hour feels like descent rather than collision. The 12th habit is taking long or late naps that steal from the night. Japan-based sleep advice often warns against lengthy or late-day naps and instead recommends shorter naps only. This is especially interesting in Japan because the country has a visible culture of fatigue and daytime sleepiness, with public concern about insufficient sleep extending far beyond private wellness talk. In that environment, the distinction between a strategic short nap and a night-damaging late nap matters a lot. A brief reset can help. A long evening sleep can push bedtime into chaos. The 13th habit is treating bedtime like improvisation. Family bedtime routine research tied to Japan includes regular timing for bed as one of the core desirable behaviors. This may sound boring compared with exotic lifestyle myths, but regularity is one of the most defensible recommendations in the entire sleep field. If bedtime wanders wildly from one night to the next, the body has fewer stable cues for when to release sleep pressure in a smooth way. The Japanese appeal here is not mystery. It is rhythm. A repeated time, repeated sequence, and repeated environmental cue can do more than one heroic all-nighter followed by one desperate recovery. Sleep. The 14th habit is bringing food and drink into the final pre-sleep stretch without thinking about it. In the Japanese Toddler Bedtime Routine Index discussed in recent commentary, avoiding food or drinks before bed was one of the routine elements tracked. For adults, this overlaps with broader sleep hygiene advice on heavy meals, stimulation, and digestion. It is not about puritanical rulemaking. It is about not loading the last 30 or 60 minutes of the day with inputs that keep the body active when it should be settling. The 15th habit is skipping the wind-down ritual completely. This is where Japanese culture adds the most texture to the topic. Evening bathing, tidying, changing into sleepwear, lowering lights, saying goodnight to rooms or objects with children, and creating a deliberate transition from active day to quiet night all fit recognizable Japanese domestic patterns, even though they are not universal and cannot be forced into a stereotype. The research-backed point is not that every Japanese person takes the same bath at the same hour. It is that routine, preparation, and calming transitions are culturally resonant and align with better sleep practice. Put those 15 habits together and a pattern appears. The evening is treated less like dead time and more like a runway. In a lot of Japanese routine thinking, good sleep starts before the bedroom and long before the eyes close. It starts with stopping caffeine early enough for the chemistry to fade. It continues with not stretching work deep into the night. It becomes easier when the home is not flooded with bright light, the bed is not a laptop desk, the phone is not delivering endless social noise. And the body is not trying to digest a late heavy meal or metabolize alcohol while pretending to rest. There is also a larger national context that makes this subject more serious than aesthetic lifestyle content. A government-facing English article on sleep in Japan described insufficient sleep as a social problem with consequences for health, accident risk, and productivity, and it cited a very large economic cost estimate for sleep deprivation in Japan. That means bedtime routines are not just personal quirks. They sit inside a country that has had to think hard about sleep debt because the problem shows up in work, transport, safety, and public health. The habits matter because the costs of poor sleep are visible at scale. Several caveats actually make the topic stronger. There is no hard evidence that Japanese people never check their phones before bed, never leave dishes in the sink overnight, or never break routine. Real people are messier than viral titles. Some bedtime routine studies in Japan have also found mixed results, with not every routine element showing a direct, clean link to better sleep or mental health. And some of the strongest science underneath this video is not uniquely Japanese at all. Screen reduction, lighter late meals, earlier caffeine cutoffs, and calmer pre-sleep transitions are broadly supported across countries. So why does the Japanese angle still matter? Because Japanese routines often dramatize the principle better than generic wellness advice does. Instead of saying manage your sleep better, the routines show what management looks like. Bathing before bed, lowering lights, closing the kitchen, preparing for the next morning, stepping away from work, and not letting the evening become a free-for-all. The appeal is not that Japan discovered magical sleep secrets. The appeal is that everyday domestic habits make sleep science visible. And there is one more subtle lesson hidden under all 15 points. Good sleep is usually lost in ordinary ways. Not in one giant disaster, but in 10 small permissions. One more coffee at 4. One heavy late dinner. 1 hour of scrolling in bed. One bright room after midnight. One emotional conversation that should have ended earlier. One long nap that drifts into evening. Japanese routine culture pushes against exactly that kind of leakage by making the night feel more intentional. If your own evenings feel messy, the useful part of this video is not copying a fantasy version of Japan. The useful part is borrowing the structure. Stop caffeine earlier. Close work earlier. Darken the room earlier. Put the phone somewhere else. Keep bedtime more regular. Add one wind-down ritual you can actually repeat. Those are not glamorous habits, but they are the habits most likely to survive contact with real life. And if you want the next video, make it the one on Japanese morning habits, because bedtime becomes much easier to fix when the first 30 minutes after waking stop sabotaging the next night. A useful way to read the Japanese advice is through environment rather than willpower. Several of the 15 habits are really about making the room, the light, the timing, and the routine do more of the work, so the person has to do less heroic resisting. The fluorescent light study in Japanese adolescence matters for this reason. If even moderate indoor evening light can suppress nocturnal melatonin, then a brighter room is not just a tougher discipline test. It is a different biological setting. The same logic applies to screens in bed. If the device is in your hand, the system is asking you to fight stimulation directly. If the device is outside the room, the system has already reduced the fight. The family routine angle also deserves more attention because it shows how bedtime habits become culture, not just self-help. Japanese commentary on toddler bedtime routines included regular bedtiming, avoiding electronic devices, and limiting food or drinks before bed among the behaviors tracked. Even when not every element shows a perfectly direct link to later sleep or mental health outcomes, the broader signal is clear. Bedtime works better when it is recognizable. Children are not expected to improvise their nights. They are guided through repeated cues. Adults often need the same thing, even if they pretend they have outgrown it. Bathing is a good example of a Japanese practice that carries both cultural texture and physiological usefulness. Evening bathing can act as a closure ritual, a cleanliness ritual, a warming ritual, and a timing ritual all at once. It says the outside world is over for the day. It also creates a before and after inside the evening, which makes the next steps feel easier to follow. No study in the data claims that every Japanese person bathes at night or that bathing alone cures insomnia. The more defensible point is that the routine helps create a deliberate transition, and deliberate transitions are exactly what sleep guidance keeps valuing. The same is true for tidying. Tidying before bed is easy to dismiss as a stereotype until you see what it does psychologically. A reset kitchen, tomorrow's clothes prepared, and a cleared room all reduce the number of unresolved signals the brain keeps scanning in the background. Japanese domestic culture often gives visible importance to endings and resets. That matters at night because an unfinished environment can make the body feel as if the day is still open. A more ordered environment tells the mind that no further action is urgently required. The Japanese university study on delayed bedtime is especially useful because it separates different types of late-night drift. Watching television and using the internet at night were associated with delayed bedtime among students living with family. Late-night interpersonal communication was one of the major factors associated with delayed bedtime among students living away from home. That distinction tells us something subtle. Solitary media and social interaction can both delay sleep, but they may do it through slightly different channels. One keeps attention activated through content. The other keeps emotion activated through people. A strong bedtime routine has to guard against both. The morning link findings from that same study deserve a second look too. Students living away from home who attended morning classes and ate breakfast tended to show earlier bedtimes. That gives bedtime discipline a practical anchor. The night is easier to control when the morning has commitments that cannot be endlessly renegotiated. This is one reason some Japanese routines can look strict from the outside. School and work start times are real, public, and socially visible. When tomorrow morning carries social weight, tonight's drift has a cost that feels immediate rather than abstract. The economic cost angle makes the topic even sharper. When a government-facing English article on sleep in Japan frames insufficient sleep as a social problem with health, accident, and productivity consequences, it pushes the discussion far beyond wellness influencers. Poor sleep becomes a labor issue, a safety issue, and a national efficiency issue. In a country known for long work hours and high social discipline, that is especially revealing. The routines are not a cute cultural quirk. They are one answer to a real problem of exhausted people trying to function in demanding systems. This is also why the title should never be read as Japanese perfection. Japan has serious sleep challenges. The country would not have such visible public discussion of insufficient sleep if everybody were already doing the right 15 things every night. The real lesson is almost the opposite. When a society recognizes that sleep debt is damaging health and productivity, it starts paying more attention to the behaviors that sabotage sleep in ordinary homes. The bedtime rules become visible because the problem became visible first. For viewers outside Japan, the transferable value is selective borrowing. You do not need to imitate someone else's culture down to the exact bath schedule or room layout. You can take the principles that the data supports. Stop caffeine earlier, because the 10-3-2-1-0 rule is grounded in timing. Stop work earlier, because the 2-hour buffer protects mental downshifting. Reduce bright light, because the melatonin study suggests even normal indoor lighting can matter. Reduce screens and late social messaging because both were linked with delayed bedtimes in real studies. Keep bedtime more regular, because repeated timing remains one of the simplest and strongest cues the body can use. Seen this way, the 15 things Japanese people never do before bed are really 15 ways of refusing to let the night become chaotic. The phone does not own the final hour. The laptop does not share the pillow. The kitchen does not stay emotionally open all night. The lights do not shout daytime after midnight. The morning is not ignored. None of that requires superstition. It requires sequence. At their best, Japanese bedtime routines make that sequence feel normal for tired people who need the night to become predictable again.